Hi guys, it's Amy and welcome to the channel, or welcome back. I hope that you're doing well. Let me know how you're doing in the comments. Before I really get into it, I want to tell you that they're trimming some trees across the street from me, so I apologize if you hear some chainsaws, machinery. They've got like a crane. It looked like they were finishing up, but fingers crossed that we are not going to have any issues. But I am really excited about today's video. We are doing cozy fantasy book recommendations. I've got an updated list for you. I've got 6 books to talk about, and I rated all of these like 3.5 stars or higher. For me, like a 2 was like, it was bad, I didn't like it. 1 was like, I absolutely hated it. A 3 or higher is like, it was okay, it was enjoyable. 4 was like, I really loved it. I definitely like would want to read it again, but it still had some issues. 5 is like perfection, so that's kind of my rating scale. So these are 3.5 or higher, so I feel like that's a good range to stay in. So I'm excited to talk about these books with you, and check out this shirt that I just thrifted recently. I'm with the band. I've read a few of these books, but I thought this was a really cool shirt. But I'm wearing the books. I've got a list of books. I'm ready to talk about them, so let's get into this list. First up is a book that I talked about on my April reading wrap-up, and that is The Cat Who Saved the Library by Sasuke Natsukawa. This is a sequel to The Cat Who Saved Books. This is a Japanese translated cozy fantasy, and it is like going on these kind of adventures into these other realms through like magic bookstores and libraries, and we go on adventures with this grumpy cat named Tiger who can talk, and he is a great character. This was definitely an interesting book. We had a different protagonist. In the first book we had a male young protagonist, and in this one we have a female protagonist, and she was definitely a great character. She dealt with chronic illness, with asthma and things like that, but she was still very resilient and brave, and I just found her very relatable. And it was just a really fun time kind of getting back into that world. So this is a whimsical cozy fantasy, but it still has a lot of emotional depth and covers some pretty serious topics in a very interesting way. In this, we definitely have an emotional story, but we are covering things like book banning and censorship, and even like capitalism's effect on knowledge. And even though some of it was pretty heavy-handed as far as getting those messages across, more so than the first book, I still feel like they were very meaningful and important things. I didn't necessarily resonate with everything, but I still really thought that they were important things to be talked about. I just thought this was a really warm but thought-provoking cozy fantasy. I feel like it's accessible to a lot of ages, like even with young readers. You know, if you have an adult kind of guiding you through it and explaining some of the things, they are important messages that I think we need to know from an early age. But even as a 34-year-old woman, I enjoyed it, so I think it definitely has a good range. But this was one that I rated 3.5 stars. So it wasn't necessarily perfect, but I still definitely want to recommend it, and it has some great messages. I'm realizing as I'm looking at my list that I have a lot of like continuations of series, including this next book, which is Somewhere Beyond the Sea by T.J. Klune, which is the second book, the sequel to The House in the Cerulean Sea, or the now called Cerulean Chronicles. And this is such a fantastic series. I absolutely love it. T.J. Klune just has a way of writing characters that are relatable, hilarious, but just bring out the emotions in you at the same time. And I definitely loved this one. So this definitely expands on kind of the magical world that we're in. It expands on character stories, especially if you've read the first one, you're familiar with Author, who is kind of the head caretaker of the orphanage that's featured in this series. And it is definitely moving, like getting to know more of his story. But we've got a lot of the same lovable characters, all the kids of the orphanage. We've got our main character from the last book who is definitely coming to his own in this second iteration. And it was just such a really good time. And it definitely was a little bit more heavy handed with the themes, but I still feel like the themes are very important. It's about acceptance. It's about, we're different, but we can all still relate to each other, respect each other. And I just really love how like heartwarming this story is. It is definitely a story about healing and empowerment and of course found family. If you loved the found family in The House on the Cerulean Sea, you're definitely going to love this one. And I'm not really getting into like a ton of like what the stories are about, but if you want more of that, you can definitely look them up on my Goodreads or look at my past videos. But if you like the idea of like magical kids in like a foster home situation with like two kind of lovable dads and them kind of like fighting social injustice, I would definitely recommend this for you. And I rated this 4.5 stars, so this was almost perfect, but I think it was just that it was a little bit heavy-handed. I feel like we could have been a little more subtle and not in that they weren't important messages that need to be put across, but it was just like, I feel like we could have like woven it into the narrative in a more poetic way. But that's just my opinion. So 4.5 out of 5 stars. Definitely recommend this series. Next up is a standalone, and that is Homegrown Magic by Jamie Pacton and Rachel Potos. And this is like a cozy romantasy with queer characters. So we've got some witchy magic vibes as we have a main character, Margot, and she is a plant witch. And then we have our other main character, Yale, and they are a noble that has run away from home in order to avoid responsibility. And they were like childhood friends and they kind of run into each other again and decide to kind of help each other out. And it's kind of this forced proximity thing, but it's kind of rekindling. So it is definitely like a second chance romance kind of vibe. This is a book that is perfect for this time of year, like the spring, summer seasons, because it is just really like lush with all of the plants. It feels very magical and whimsical. But even with all of that, it still has a lot of intensity emotionally. We've got a lot of like romantic tension, but also tension with like the individual lives of the characters and kind of the duties and responsibilities that they have. There is definitely some betrayal in here as well, but they each definitely have their own personal struggles that they're trying to overcome. And I really liked that about it because even though with all this emotional depth and connection, there is definitely a lot of spice in this book, which I was kind of surprised about. Definitely for a cozy fantasy, but I really liked that the emotional connection was very grounded in real life and the characters had their own struggles that they were trying to overcome and how they were kind of coming together in order to overcome. And so even though it has a lot of the spice, it still has a lot of grounding to it. So like I said, this definitely has queer representation. We have a non-binary character and a queer relationship, but I just really loved how they just accepted each other and that it is definitely a story about acceptance as well as you're kind of seeing this relationship unfold. Now, unfortunately, this does include some tropes that some people don't necessarily like the third act breakup and definitely some miscommunication. So if that would deter you, I don't know if I would recommend this, but I still really enjoyed it. So this was a 3.5 star for me. Like I said, it wasn't necessarily perfect. I feel like just the spice was a bit much for me. I'm not a spice person, so that's my personal preference. But other than that, I definitely loved this book. So 3.5 for the spice, and I think it maybe dragged just a hair at the end, but it wasn't anything major. But This is definitely one that I would recommend for queer rep. Next up is another cozy standalone, and that is The Teller of Small Fortunes by Julie Leung. This is definitely a heartwarming story, but it has kind of like Dungeons and Dragon vibes. We're kind of going on a traveling adventure with kind of a ragtag group, but we are following Tao, who is a fortune teller, and the kind of adventure that she goes on and the found family that she collects along the way. And I feel like when it comes to cozy fantasies, there seems to be a theme brewing where it has the coziness but still the emotional depth. And I've got kind of a list of things that this covers. So it explores themes of death and loss, belonging, and self-acceptance, and it's done in a really beautiful way. We have kind of a story of immigrants and how they try to integrate into society of like another country but still hold their own culture, and I feel like it's just portrayed in a really beautiful way. So this is an emotional and character driven story, but it's still really cozy. The issue that I had with it was it had some pacing issues. I feel like it definitely was dragging at the end, but I still really enjoyed the story overall. So I gave this 3.5 stars, and I would definitely recommend this if you like the idea of like a cozy adventure, and definitely if you like a story about healing. The chainsaws are at it again, so I'm taking a water break. I've got, this is like what you drink in a day, water. I'm kind of behind actually. So it goes from like 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. I'm like at 1 p.m. and right now it's like 2:38. So water break. My next one is a series that I absolutely love, and this is now a completed series, and that is the Emily Wilde series, and the third book is Emily Wilde and the Compendium of Lost Tales. I love this series. I love Emily Wilde, and it is just such a great kind of nerdy, cozy fantasy. So we are definitely going deeper into the Fae realm in this story, and it still maintains kind of like the whimsical and scholarly vibes to it, but there are definitely higher stakes in this story. Emily and our beloved character Wendell's romance is definitely more of a feature in this book, which I liked, but it definitely gives the story a little bit of a different tone. And we also have like a little bit less emphasis on like the found family aspect, which it's not huge in the previous books, but it's less in this one. And we also have some beloved like side characters that aren't quite as featured in this book. So just something to be aware of, but it still is a really fun time, and we definitely have a great villain character in this story. So even with some of the changes and kind of a little bit of a tonal shift, we still have kind of the overall same sort of theme where we're fighting evil and chaotic fairies with scholarly knowledge. So it still has the magical roots that you love about this series. And even though this wasn't necessarily my favorite book of the three, I still really enjoyed this. I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. So if you want a cozy fantasy that has kind of nerdy, scholarly vibes, I would definitely recommend this. Next up is a book that I absolutely fell in love with last month, and that is The Maid and the Crocodile by Jordan Ifugo. Jordan Ifugo is now an automatic buy author for me, now that I've read all of her books. I need to get her Ray Bear duology on my shelf, but I got this one at a book sale at a used bookstore that's near me, and I just got a really good deal on it. It was in great condition, and I'm so glad that I got it because this was absolutely fantastic. So this is a cozy standalone, but it is still in the African-inspired world of Ifugo's Ray Bear duology. And I would definitely recommend reading the duology first, but I feel like there is enough information in here where if you're not wanting to get into a duology, you could read this, but there are characters and things that might be spoiled for you if you read this first. So just kind of be aware of that. I feel like it's not too much, but just something to be aware of. I personally read the duology first and then this, and I'm glad that I did. So just something to keep in mind. Again, this is an African-inspired cozy fantasy, and it is a loose retelling of Howl's Moving Castle. So we are following a maid, Sade. She actually is an orphan who aged out of her orphanage, and she gets a job as a maid. And she is also known as a curse eater. She has magic abilities where she can kind of quote unquote eat your curses, your sins, your regrets in order to kind of relieve you from those things. And she does that by singing and cleaning. So it's a very interesting kind of magic. And then we also have our crocodile character, and he definitely is the Howl character of our story. If you're familiar with Howl's Moving Castle, everybody loves Howl, and he's a great character, and he definitely has those vibes. I don't want to give too much away about him, but he definitely has god-like powers, and he's a very interesting character. Fuko's writing is absolutely incredible. She is so inventive. I love the African folklore that she kind of bases this on, but the way that she kind of ties everything together and brings things from the Ray Bear series, it just really blew me away. I absolutely love this. And we have some really great themes that are explored in here. I've got my list again. We've got family, we've got womanhood, we've got found family, we have romance and justice. And it's just all woven in so well. Nothing feels forced. And it's just an emotionally rich and heartfelt story. The romance in this is so sweet, and it definitely has some intense moments. So even though this is a cozier fantasy, definitely cozier than the Ray Bear duology, it still has some intense moments. So just be aware going into it. It might not be as cozy as some of the others on this list, but she does call this her cozy fantasy. So I definitely would consider it cozy. It was definitely a fun time reading it. I just loved how layered this story was. And again, the writing blew me away, but it is just a very heartfelt, cozy fantasy, and I highly, highly recommend. This was obviously a 5-star read for me, and I definitely recommend reading her Ray Bear duology before this, but just in general, I recommend it as well. Alright guys, those are my 6 cozy fantasy recommendations, my new updated list. And I know some of these were continuations of series. I didn't necessarily go into detail about the descriptions of those because they are out there and everything. I've done previous videos on them, but if you have questions about them, definitely let me know in the comments. And you can check out my previous videos. You can check out my Goodreads or my Fable, where I have reviews and everything for those books. So all that information is there for you, but definitely feel free to ask me questions. But if you have any of your own cozy fantasy recommendations, I am always looking for them, so definitely leave them in the comments. And if you got this far, I said a flower last time. This time, leave me a heart emoji in the comments if you got to the end of this video. And I appreciate you watching and engaging with me, and I hope that you enjoyed this list. I will see you guys very soon. Bye!